He is with us from the Raphah Institute, and he will introduce the rest of the panelists.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I trust that you have had an amazing time at your conference, whatever sessions you've been in. I hope that it has been beneficial to you. I hope it has been uplifting and encouraging to you. And I hope it has been inspirational and stimulating for you. And we're hoping the same thing for this breakout. So thank you all for being here today. My name is Travis Claybooks. I give leadership at Raphah Institute. We are a nonprofit here in Nashville that, among a few things, we focus on restorative justice work. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We have an exciting, and I think brilliant panel with us today. I'll be moderating the conversation today with our four panelists. But I think this is going to be probably, and I haven't seen the whole slate, but I think this is going to be one of the more inspirational, one of the more impactful conversations that you are going to experience in your time here at the conference. So I would just say buckle up. So we're going to talk about themes of incarceration and restorative justice as an alternative idea, philosophy, and practice to incarceration and retributive and punitive forms of I won't call it justice, but punitive responses when harm happens. Thinking about restorative justice as an alternative to that. And we have some experts in the room who have both lived experience, both in terms of incarceration as well as of restorative justice work. And so I want to take a moment now to just allow our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to sort of pass the rock around here by way of introduction. And what I want you to do is just simply tell us your name, the organization that you represent, and give us a very, very, very brief response to the question of just kind of what brings you here today? What brings you to this panel? Listen, take only about 90 seconds to do that, right? 90 seconds or so to do that. Just your name, the name of the organization that you represent, and kind of what you do or what brings you to this panel today. So I'm gonna toss it over to Terrance. We'll get Terrance going. Just 90 seconds, man. Your name, organization, and just a brief summary of what you do and what brings you to the space. Terrance, go ahead, man.
Thank you very much, Travis. I know you was gonna call me first. Reminded me when I was in school. Sitting there, my name began with A, so I always had to go first. But thank you, my brother. Thank you for this warm invitation for him. My name is Terrance Aikens, and I am a part of Raphah Institute. I am a restorative justice facilitator at Raphah Institute, where we work as, where we said, we give an alternative to incarceration. It's a diversion process, a program where we work with our youth, work with the people harmed to come and remedy the harm, dealing basically with the community where we work with the youth. Where we know that incarceration is not the answer. Incarceration does not get to the root causes. So we really get to the root causes. Love working with our youth, giving them second chances. Also, it's what give the person harm an opportunity to see and to explain what justice looks like to them. Based with the community. And I'm thankful. What brings me here is because I am a person who was directly impacted by incarceration. And at that time where I was a youth incarcerated, I was not given an alternative to incarceration. So I'm here to make a difference. Thank you very much, Travis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Terrance. And as I see people are doing, feel free to put into the chat even who you are and where you're from. Those who are attending the session, just sort of drop your name in, where you're from, what organization you're from. Maybe if you want to put a little something about what you do in there, no problem. Andrea, will you just take a moment, 90 seconds, introduce yourself, where you're from, who you're with, and a little bit about what you do.
Hello, my name is Andrea Alzheimer. I am in Seattle, Washington. I work with Community Passageways, which is a felony youth diversion program. I am a community ambassador as well as the director of reentry. Like Terrance, I have been impacted by incarceration. I spent a little over 20 years incarcerated myself, so there wasn't an alternative to incarceration. I understand that there is always an underlying issue which brings people to that place, and whether it's causing harm to another individual or committing the variety of crimes. The individuals that we work with in our organization, we try to get to the underlying issue what brought them to the criminal justice system in the first place. And if we can unravel that, I like to use the metaphor of an onion and peeling back the layers. And if we can get to the pit of that onion or the pit of the issue, then the healing can begin. We understand that it takes more than just the youth or the young person that we're working with to heal, right? Oftentimes it takes community, and we have to go into the homes. We do a wraparound service. So we're in the homes and we're trying to heal the whole family. And in healing the family, there comes the healing to the community. Andrea Alzheimer, Community Passageways.
Awesome, Andrea. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very, very powerful work you guys are doing there. We can't wait to hear even more about that. Paul, talk to us, man. Tell us a little bit about, just give us your name, where you're from, what you do, and just a little bit about what brings you to the table. 90 seconds, ready to go.
Paul Sutton. I too work with and for Community Passageways in the community. Recently, I moved on from a division deep dive into InReach, which is hopefully going to work in concert with some of the reentry efforts that we have. Myself also have been impacted by incarceration, did 27 years myself. And I believe my reasoning for being here is because I always saw a disconnect between city, council, county, community, and the convicted. So I wish to create a communication to where that restorative mechanism might be injected into the process of rehabilitation.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Paul. Looking for you all's expertise coming through. Ashlee, talk to us. Tell us a little bit about just, introduce yourself, your name, what you do, and just a little bit about what brings you to the table. 90 seconds, ready, go.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashlee Sellars, and I use she, her pronouns. I come into this work because I've seen how systems have failed youth over the years, and I've also seen how they fail people who have been harmed in our communities by other members of community. I've witnessed firsthand how a restorative process can help families of harm, even if that harm is severe as a homicide, and just recognizing how our current legal system does not afford either party the ability to be able to find healing in community and be able to move forward. I am one of the leaders at Raphah Institute, and I'm just grateful to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. As you can tell, we have the experts in the room. We have people who have both, who have the experience and the insight on really both sides of this conversation. And so I'm inviting us to eat freely of the information that's going to be shared today. All right, I have a poll question for our participants. Looks like we have about 60 or so folks in the space. I have a poll that I would like to put up, a poll question that I would like for us to just take a couple of minutes to participate in. Have you ever participated in a restorative justice process? Yes, no, I'm not sure. Have you ever participated in a restorative justice process? Let's take a couple of seconds to put yes, no, I'm not sure. Awesome, we got the poll up. All right, let's see. We're gonna take just a couple of more minutes. Is there a way for us to see the results as they are coming in? I wonder if there's a way for us to see the results as they're coming in. Right now, what I see is I see the poll question. Is there a way for us to see those results as they are coming?
I could share my screen because I can see them here, but I don't know that I can publish it otherwise till we end.
All
I
right.
can share the end results, but if you want to see it now, I could share my screen.
Okay, share your screen with us. Share your screen with us.
Okay.
Let's see where are we? Just want to get a sense of what kind of experience or exposure we have as a group had with restorative justice as a practice, whether or not you have participated in a restorative justice process. Oftentimes when we engage with some of the panels that we work on, sometimes we're talking to groups of people who have extensive experience with restorative justice, and then other times we are speaking with friends who have not had any experience at all with a restorative justice process. And so this is just a little interactive moment. Let's see. We are only, let's see, someone says seeing your screen, but only seeing the Windows logo. I would agree. We are not capturing the results. Wonder if we'll take just maybe a second. All right. Okay, here we go. All right. So we have about a quarter of the folks who have said, yes, I have participated in a restorative justice process. We have about half the group that are saying, nope, no experience. And then another quarter, I'm not quite sure whether or not I have. Okay, so we've got a mixed group today. I want to take a moment. Thank you all for participating in that. I want to take about 3 minutes now, and I want to share very briefly a video with you to just to start the conversation.
More than half of victims of violent crime don't even call the police in the first place. They prefer nothing to everything we have to offer. The vast majority of crime survivors' pain goes unhealed. What the existence of restorative justice means is that we can no longer pretend we don't know what else to do. As a country, we're really good at punishment. It's passive. It doesn't require people to act, to think. It certainly doesn't require them to change. When we lock people up, we excuse them from their responsibility to answer for what they've done. Restorative justice is a process to hold them accountable. It's a tool. People take turns answering questions like what happened, what needs arise, whose responsibility is it to meet those needs, and how is that person going to do it? It requires someone to take responsibility, to repair things as much as possible, and to never commit that harm again. This isn't about feeling sorry, it's about doing sorry. Things like go to school, get a job, pay restitution, apologize, do community service. Restorative justice practices have been used to address low-level infractions like vandalism, up to addressing the impact of murders on the surviving family members. Restorative justice processes are first and foremost about meeting the needs of people who are hurt. Sometimes the person who can make the greatest contribution to a survivor's healing is the person who harmed them. To come through trauma, we need answers to our questions. To say, my life was never the same after you hurt me like that. Crime survivors want the most safety possibly available. So if incarceration actually produced safety, we would have the safest country in human history. That's not what we have. The core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, and inability to meet one's economic needs, and exposure to violence. And we bake those into prisons to try and keep people from committing further violence. Incarceration exposes people to exactly the things that increase the likelihood that they'll go on to harm others. People who are hurt deserve a process that will help them heal. People who are responsible for crime have an obligation to be accountable for that. All of us deserve responses to crime that actually make us safer. Our current criminal justice system doesn't deliver any of those, and restorative justice at its best delivers them all.
All right. Let's center our conversation in the idea of incarceration. And my first question is coming to you, Paul, man. I want to toss it to you. Talk about prison. I think I heard you say you spent 27 years in prison.
That look is a look that can only happen by a roaring fire at a Verbo cabin. After eating.
So sorry about that. You said you spent 27 years in prison. Talk about the experience to your degree of comfort. And let me say, to those who are attending, you may hear some things that may be triggering for you. Okay, there may be some stories. There may be some things that you hear today that may evoke some serious emotions. I want to invite you to think now about your own self-care. Okay, think now about how you're going to take care of yourself emotionally, psychologically, not only during this time, but after this time. If something is challenging for you, please think about how you are going to care for yourself. Paul, talk to us a little bit about in what ways was prison harmful?
Excellent question. In what ways was prison harmful? Sometimes I went into prison when I was 20 years old. I came out when I was 48. So there are certain things that I were introduced to, certain violations of social norms, personal moral constitutions, of personal safety. I was thinking about this conference over the last couple of weeks, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs continued to come into my head. And two of them, particularly in concert with restorative justice, that I'll speak to more later on, possibly, but two of them, love and the need for belonging, as well as self-actualization. Right. So as I went into prison some time ago, I would like to say that predatorial instincts or predatorial philosophies, ideologies that were in prison, are in prison, were having a hard time struggling. I come from the generation of gang violence and gang membership affiliation. So some of us are decidedly, openly, and I apologize if I offend, I'll say this, not for myself, but broadly, some of us have homophobic ideas. Some of us has ideas that are actually against, right? Incarceration, some of the things that go there. So as we get introduced to these facilities, these subcultures, right? And all of the miscreant appetites that were caged into there, that were located in these high concentrations, whether they were murderers, sex offenders, or petty thieves, right? They're in high concentration. So what we have as a young man, often impressionable, right? Most likely in need of something, what we often have is an embrace of these criminal personalities, things that I didn't know. A lot of people currently are talking about brain science, the underdevelopment of us that go in there. So as we're in there, we're already underdeveloped. We know that we're impressionable. We know that we are easily influenced. We know we have impulse control because we have no awareness of life, living, and circumstance. So as we're rushed into this process of rehabilitation, if you will, we are introduced with people to atmospheres that are often against socialization, often against correction. And so my experience in the deprivation of some of those things that are necessary, as pointed out by Maslow's hierarchy of need. Those are the things that were first removed, right? And so that right there, some of the travesties, I think, if I can answer your question in that, those two things, the self-actualization, the sense of belonging, the sense of love were immediately removed, and they were replaced by individuals who have been socially deprived, some for decades, who have been practicing in a way that is continuously predatory, right? Even in that sense. So I think that with regards to incarceration, we often seek some form of correction, but as we go in there, we know that we place those that need to be corrected. I did in a high concentration with those that do not seek that. And they're inundated with information that we hadn't had before. We become better criminals often. And that is the bad thing. We go to prison and we often come out better criminals.
So I hear you talking about, first of all, thank you for that. Just even allowing us to peek a little bit inside of your mind and your own personal experience. I understand that this is deeply, intimate stuff and personal stuff. Young man, 20 years old, finding yourself suddenly in an environment where it is madness. And the most basic needs that you have are being met with perhaps something that is the total opposite of what you actually need. And so in these ways, incarceration was harmful. I heard you say it was easy for me to come out a better criminal than when I went in. Terrance, pick up this, man. Pick this up where Paul has left it off. Talk a little bit about the ways in which incarceration caused more harm.
Yeah, and I appreciate my brother Paul for articulating in the way he did how prison can affect you so many different ways and introduce you into that. So I went in as a 17-year-old and I spent half of my life in prison. So I spent 17 years in prison, and in a way that it was very, very harmful, just off the top to me. When I went in there, just being introduced to dehumanization, the dehumanization. First, just going through the whole process of the dehumanization, stripping you of citizenship, of feeling like that, you now belong to a whole nother system, that you are no longer a human being. First, they take your name and they give you a number. They make you a number, so they change your identity. First of all, they strip you from the identity from being a human being to now you become property. You're labeled. So they tell you now you're no longer a human being. You belong unto us. I was in the Department of Tennessee, TDOC, Tennessee Department of Correction. They put that on your back. They put the number, they give you the name tag, they put the number on your back, they give you the ID. You lose identity of self. First, you lose all type of humanity. If you don't know who you are, then you're gonna lose who you are. You're gonna lose who you are in the system, and coming in as a teenager, as a young man, as basically still a child, being impressionable. That was very, very, very dehumanizing of me, to strip me of my name. When they take you in and they strip search you and they have you to strip down and take all of your clothes off, and you have to stand before another human being and they tell you to bend over. And I just be honest. And I don't know how to sugarcoat nothing no more, because it's real and it is the truth. And that's how I looked at it. I have never experienced any of that in my life, to stand before and open right before other people and have to strip naked in front of other people and to tell you to bend over and to spread your body parts, and to cough in front of other people. And some of them officers in there, they will make fun of you and try to humiliate you. That was very humiliating. And then if you wasn't coughing loud enough, they'd tell you to cough again. And if you wasn't spreading your body parts wide enough for them, they would want you to spread them again in front of other people, to take you of your name, strip you of your humanity, and to give you the clothes and to have you just performing things that were just dehumanizing to me. When I first got transformed, when I transitioned, when they transferred me from classification to the adult penal system, when I went in the adult penal system, I went into what they call a program called, it was called RDAP. It was a RDAP, and it's supposed to be a re-entry program to where it prepared people to re-enter back into society. Well, I went in there and I seen grown men, and they tried to put me in a program. I was 19 years old. They tried to put me in that program. Well, I went in there and I seen grown men in their 30s and grown men standing in corners, facing corners. I seen they had grown men wearing chicken chicken hats on their head, standing in the middle of circles, clocking and crowing like they were birds. Crowing like they were actual birds, walking on the right side of the hallway, being told not to speak. You cannot talk. Can't talk walking down the hallways. That was complete. I felt like my dignity was being stripped from me as a human being. My dignity was being stripped from me as a human being. So right then and there, I had to battle with the fight of who am I and where am I, to be isolated and sent out to where I didn't even know where I was. I had no idea. I felt like a slave. I felt like I was a slave. First of all, to be shackled, handcuffed, and to be thrown in a place in the middle of nowhere where no one can find you, to where no one can find you. That right there was very dehumanizing to me. You know, I had to fight to hold on to my name, to fight to hold on to my dignity, being talked to like you are nothing, been treated like you are absolutely nothing. That right there, that deals with your confidence. It deals with your self-esteem. It deals with your identity. It deals with who you are. It gets you to the point to where I understand why people become institutionalized. It almost institutionalized me to control of my mind. It almost imprisoned my mind and had me to become a totally different person than a human being. The system was designed to strip you from all humanity and to make you to get you to the point to where now you belong as property. You're not a human being. You are a number, and that's what's told you. You're not a human being. You are property. And so that was a harm.
Terrance, man, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that, man. And thank you for the passion is not even a word. Just the rawness of your experience and for being in touch with that. Thank you for carrying that. And again, I give honor to each of you for being willing to allow us to peek inside of what is, a very intimate space in your experience in your life. Andrea, I want you to think about the same question, but I want you to think about it as a female. Talk to us about the female experience of being incarcerated. Paul and Terrance have kind of given us some aspects, some general aspects of it. In what ways was the incarceration experience, maybe in ways that we don't think about all the time, but what are some of the specific peculiarities of harm associated with incarceration as a female, experienced as a female? Talk to us a little bit about that.
First, I have to tell my brothers that my heart is absolutely racing from your experiences. And I just want to apologize that you all had to endure the things that you endured, because your experience is definitely different from mine. So I apologize to you all that you had to experience that. And listening to them, I was thinking about the difference with women being incarcerated opposed to men. And it is quite different, because a lot of the women in prison are mothers, right? And we were the prime caregiver to our children. So entering a prison at the age of 31, I left 3 kids, 9, 12, and 15, right? And I was their sole provider. I was their caretaker. I was their nurturer. I was their cheerleader. You know, I was their everything, and they were mine. And going into prison and seeing babies in prison affected me in a way that it really hurt. I didn't understand it. They had a baby program in prison where mothers that entered prison pregnant, if they were eligible, would enter into this program and they would give birth, and their children would be able to stay with them in prison up to the age of 2 years old. So entering prison at the age of 31 without having a handbook on how to do prison and having to experience it and kind of, you know, glance from afar and watch how others are enduring their incarceration and how they're navigating through this system, you know, was my roadmap. And, you know, I could either take 1 or 2 courses. I can take the course where you're trying to become better and better understand how you ended there in the first place, or you can do the things that are expected of prisoners and just turn up and be rowdy and go in and out of segregation and things like that. And when I entered prison, my roommate was 18 years old. I said my daughter was 15. I can't imagine sharing a room with my child in prison. So that really concerned me, right? That here I am sharing a room with a baby, just about like, and looking at her, she acted like an 18-year-old. Right? She didn't have adult-like behaviors in there. She was like still a child. The way she interacted, the way she spoke, you know, her sense, everything about her was a child. So being in a room with a child was hurtful, right? But then watching her be punished, as one would think an adult, she had 30 plus years. And so trying to imagine how to do prison with kids. I entered the prison and it was 400 was the population, and I exited and it was over 1,000. And I can guarantee that 50% of that population was under the age of 31 as I entered. So trying to understand what the dynamics of this was, it seemed like we were commodity. Right? We were in prison, we were stripped from our rights. Terrance said it best, is that I was no longer, sometimes I didn't even recognize my name. When someone would be saying Andrea, I didn't answer because I'm used to being called Altheimer by my last name, right? I would only hear my first name from my close friends or family. So being stripped of that, or having to identify with that number, 743-846, as my identity, right? Being stripped of that. Also, going back to motherhood, leaving home and entering into a prison, having visitation with my kids and only being able to embrace briefly. I think Paul talked about love, and touch is very important, right? Especially for mothers and for women. And not to be able to embrace your children. You walk into a visiting room, experiencing it myself firsthand and watching others. You're already in the visiting room, or you come in late, whatever, but your child wanting to run up and embrace you, and an officer telling them that they can't do so. Right? Putting the brakes on it. So then your kids are also being punished. So you have to do a brief hug. They don't understand that. So being even stripped of that, or women being stripped of their parental rights because of incarceration as a prerequisite. Right? I have many friends that lost custody of their kids, and their kids have been adopted out because of them being incarcerated. And I won't say I had a 40-year sentence, but not even women that carried the sentence that I was handed down, but even shorter than that. For someone to tell you that because you have committed this crime, I say that when women are incarcerated, that it seems like we have upset the societal norm. So the punishment seems stiffer, right? With us I didn't, and I'll give you an example of that. We had a meeting and we had prosecutors in the rooms. We had community members in the rooms, and it was the Black Prisoners Caucus. We were trying to get it introduced into the women's prison. And a gentleman, Gerald Bradford, posed a question: how many of you have more than 20 years, right? every hand in the room raised because every woman had a sentence longer than 20 years. So a sentence longer than 20 years, you are displaced from your children's life and you are displaced from the community. And when we think about what women offer to the community, and for so many women to be displaced from that for 20 years plus, right, causes harm not only to you, but to your community. So looking around that room and experiencing it firsthand in prison, that's what caused harm more to me, is the separation of your identity, the separation from your family, and the separation from your community for a long period of time. There was no restorative justice because we were all there, and there weren't any programs that promoted restorative measures. It was punitive, right? And so I won't go further into that because I know that's going to be another part of your questions, but the separation from children and watching the population increase at the younger age coming in. I was no longer incarcerated with my peers. I was being incarcerated with my children's peers.
Wow, thank you, Andrea, for just giving us a view, maybe something that we never really think about, just that angle and that perspective. Ashlee, I want you to pick it up from there, carrying forward this idea of, it's different being a woman incarcerated. Talk a little bit about your experience as being a woman in the incarceral setting. Give us a bird's eye view into that and how that differs.
So I think it's important to note that my experience as a white woman in that incarceral setting, my peers were Black and brown women. I saw how Black and brown women were treated, and I know some of the privileges that I had. And that doesn't mean that I didn't suffer some injustices. That didn't mean that I wasn't treated in inhumane ways, but just definitely recognizing the white supremacy that is still present in those particular settings, I think is just super important for me to acknowledge for myself. I guess Andrea and I could have been roommates. I went in at 17, facing 60 years plus 25. I often say was more because of my inaction as opposed to my actions. I had dealt with a ton of trauma when I was growing up. I ended up moving in with a guy. He committed an offense. I didn't do anything about it, right? Or he created harm in our community and I didn't do anything, and I never gave a statement. And so I think that's important for a different conversation. But with regards to this one and what that system creates for me, I was automatically put in solitary confinement. I spent up until my 18th birthday in solitary. I think unique spaces because I was a female that they didn't know what to do with. They put me in a new facility. They put me in a wing that only had 5 rooms. The only time they brought somebody back there was when they were putting someone in the rubber room. And so that kind of exposed me to the isolation as a whole, not just as I was celled by myself, but I was in a wing by myself. And I didn't know any of the rules. And so I was oftentimes, people forgot to feed me. They didn't let me out for a shower. They didn't let me out for a phone call. I didn't have access to the library. Like it was just all of these things. When I turned 18, I was transferred into so I'd already been transferred into the adult system, but was in lockdown. When I turned 18, they transferred me to the maximum security facility, and I remained on lockdown then because of my charge, and just experienced horrific things at that particular time with overcrowding and lack of medical care for people, and seeing violence against other peers, and just this whole thing. When I got transferred into the prison, it was I tell my story a lot in different aspects, and it's really interesting to me because no matter how vulnerable we come into this space, there are just so many walls that are continue to be put up. I heard Terrance talking a little bit about just how we're searched and how we're treated. And like, it is just this continual practice of dehumanization, of, someone telling me, you know, you want to act like an adult. I'm gonna like an adult, right? Like just this brutality of, I didn't mean anything to anybody. I didn't mean anything. And they could lock me in a cell and not give me access to a phone or not give me access to mail, and nobody would ever know anything that I was going through. And I remember one of the times that I was in solitary confinement, there was a woman that was in the cell underneath me, and she had just been crying out. And then the SORT team came in, right? And you've got tactical gear, you've got gloves that have knuckles built into them, you've got elbow pads and knee pads and helmets and chest gear, and like it looks like somebody is going to a war, and you've got 10 males presenting themselves, marching, you know, calling out orders. And then they dragged this woman out of her cell, this elderly woman out of her cell, who was clearly in a mental state. They cut her clothes off of her in the middle of the entire pod, and then drug her to a different cell away from everybody. And I remember standing in that window and being in a space of like, I want to bash my head against the window. I want to punch the glass until my knuckles are bloody. Like I felt just this animalistic space of, this isn't okay. Like the way that you're treating us isn't okay. And not knowing or having any type of recourse, and not knowing what to do with that. And, you know, if if I had gotten written up for being in that particular mind state and I had to go up for parole, then the parole people would have said, well, you don't know how to act, and so we're going to keep you here, as opposed to recognizing that people are understanding those humanities and being in space with others, right? I remember another time where I saw a young woman have a seizure. The officer put a boot on her neck, and I spoke up and was like, you can't, like, what are you doing? You can't treat her like that. Like, you need to call medical, you need to do these things. And he turned to me and was like, do you want to, like, you want to be next? Is that what you want? Like, you want to be next? And like, what does it do to you to be in a space where you have to say, you know what, I'm not going to speak up against anybody, the treatment of anybody else, because I don't want to be treated that way. At the same point, knowing that you have absolutely no power. And I remember my friends grabbing me and pulling me back and saying, like, you've got to sit down. It's going to get all of us, right? It's not just going to be her. It's not just going to be you. Like, it's going to be all of us if you act out in this moment. It is, you know, I hear some of the words of people, and it is love. It is, you know, appropriate physical touch. But it's voice, it's humanity, it's being able to be you're not even able to be in community with your peers in any type of way. It is, I don't know. I really don't think that we have the words as a society to grasp the trauma that prisons hold.
Yeah, thank you, Ashlee. You know, we can feel the story in your voice as we're listening to you. I mean, this is the same for all of you. Thank you again and again. Deep honor and deep respect to the space that you are allowing yourself to go into to share this, in the hopes that people will benefit from this. There are billions of stories that could and probably should be told about what happens in incarceration. I want to pivot in the last several minutes that we have. I want to pivot to restorative justice as an alternative framework. And Andrea and Paul, I want to toss it to both of you to talk together about restorative justice as an alternative framework. If you want to talk a little bit about your work and how that's being demonstrated in the work that you do, certainly people can go to your website, and we'll make sure that gets in the chat if people have not checked that out. But talk to the group of folks, you know, half of which have not had any experience with restorative justice. Talk to us about restorative justice as an alternative framework. Talk about it personally. What difference would it have made for you had you had a framework like restorative justice, what difference would it have made for maybe the others involved in your case, in the cases that you all were involved in? Talk about it from that perspective, because, and as you do that, let's throw this little piece in here, because I imagine in the mind of some person may be listening to you, each one of you, and they may be saying, well, if you do the crime, you do the time. Well, you deserve all of that because you did something to deserve it. You did something, you caused someone. What about the people who were harmed in your case? They are suffering too. So eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Address that. Talk about restorative justice as a different response and how it might be able to embrace all of those things. Andrea, Paul, I'm going to toss it to both of you to let you talk through that for, the next.
I want to do the definition.
Go for it.
So the first thing is the definition of restorative justice. I looked this up and it says a system of criminal justice which focuses on the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. Okay, so first of all, if I look at the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation of victims, most of us that have victims in our cases, you are prohibited from having contact with your victim, right? You can't have a conversation with your victim, that you can't have restorative efforts. I tried. I reached out to DOC and I said that I would like to have a mediation or some form of restorative process with my victim, because as I am in prison healing and dealing with the underlying issues that brought me through to prison, which was trauma from childhood growing up, right? I was able to deal with those issues, confront them, and then actually heal from them. And I wanted to go into the second piece, and because I wanted to figure out, how did I end up in this space? How did I end up on that day committing this crime, and harm was involved, right? And so then I knew my victim. So I wanted to have an opportunity for the healing piece to take place between us, the restorative piece, because though I'm healing, I want to make sure that they have that same access as they deserved, right? But I was prohibited because of the law. The law says that you cannot have contact with your victims, and so therefore we couldn't do that. Had we'd been able to have contact, then they would have known the restorative measures the rehabilitative measures that I was taking inside prison to ensure that no one else would be harmed, that I would be healed, right? And doing my part, that I'm taking classes, I'm working, I'm going to school, and I'm doing all the things to become better, so that they wouldn't feel that if I was released early or on my scheduled date, that they had anything to fear. But they weren't afforded that opportunity to have that conversation. And I see that a lot with the offenders and victims, and then comes clemency hearings, early release, or whatever, and they're opposing the release because they still believe that you're that same person, because they haven't been given the information or an opportunity to have this dialogue with you, or this mediation, or have their voice heard. You have the courtroom, right? But that's different. They need to know the progress that you have made while you were incarcerated, and we don't have that opportunity. Paul?
Talk about that, Paul. Talk about the, pick up where Andrea's leaving off there. Talk about the voice that people who are harmed in cases don't have in the traditional process versus the voice that they do have in a restorative justice process.
So that is one of the things that I see. I had heard in the justice process. Those of us who have been criminally involved, who have been therefore justice involved. If you look at this situation, there is crime, criminal, court, or city, right? Those things, those states, crime, criminal, justice involvement are constants in these equations, right? Only periodically do we go through our algebraic solutions and realize, oh, we missed an equation, we missed a part of it with the victim, right? So the victim gets injected every now and then, right? Every now and again at the start of the crime, yep, the victim is there, right? Possibly if they need him need him or her during the trial, the victim is victimized again, we often hear, right? And then you hear no more of the victim no longer until parole or something like happen. There are wide gaps. I wrote something down as Andrea was speaking, and I said, social distancing has been a thing for a long time, right? You think about once you get a person behind these walls, that social distancing has made you safe. We believe that now retribution is being enacted on these individuals and everything is good. I've been vindicated. You often hear victims and people of society say after a sentencing, yes, we feel that we've been vindicated. Justice has been served, right? But then again, we hear that person come up again later on. This is because I think inclusivity has been absent the justice involvement process, inclusivity of the victim at all stages, right? Of my rehabilitation. I ran and got, I don't know if this is about a thick, a inch and a half thick collection of accomplishments and accolades that I've had from throughout my 27 years. I don't know when my rehabilitation actually took hold or anything like that. Could have been in any one of those programs that lasted at least, like, let's say a minimum of 14 weeks, right? And there's abundance of those over the 27 years, right? Could not, there's a thing called chronos, right? And some of those that have been justice involved. When you have any type of interaction with incarcerated, with corrections, your counselor or anything like that, negative or positive, they put it in your chronos. They type it out. These are what they call public information. Anybody can go get those. But the victim rarely realizes that they can actually track my progress. They can actually have a participatory engagement in me and see that, yes, well, Paul Sutton did at 20 years old in 1993 enact a certain crime, to where you might think because you're familiar or intimate in that crime, because that crime happened to you 27 years later when I come up for parole, that you have some type of edifying information that you would give somebody that is deliberating on my culpability for release today. And that's unfair. The restorative justice that needs to happen is inclusivity, I believe, for the city, the council, the county, the criminal, the community, as well as those that are directly impacted. They lose opportunities and therefore feel themselves cheated, right? Feel themselves ignored, feel themselves dismissed, and then feel all resources and allocation of consideration goes to me, the perpetrator of the crime, right? Because now we're talking about this. However, had the victim, those who are impacted, they give them a victim impact statement opportunity. I want you to give and have a victim impact process opportunity, to where at every process, I go to classification while I'm in prison. I think a victim impact statement or a victim impact person could and should be involved in that, but on both ways. That person gets to actually have an evidence-based thing that, wait a minute, Mr. Sutton has been getting up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning to go to victim awareness, to go to anger management, to go to these certain things and all that, so you can see that I am doing and I am applying tools to myself that might allow me an opportunity not to be the same person that I was the last time you probably saw or spoke towards or about me.
Thank you very much. Ashlee, Terrance, talk to us a little bit about the intersection of your work and specifically around restorative justice and its intersection with the criminal legal process. Why does it work does it work, and why? What is it about what you're doing that makes a difference, that makes restorative justice a viable alternative to incarceration. Talk a little bit about it.
Rossi, you want to go first? Okay. So, yeah. So at Raphah, we do believe that we are victim-centered. I think we recognize the victimization that's happening for the young people who have committed harm in our community, as well as the people who have been harmed by that, by those choices and how that moves through our community. We have a voluntary process that really says, how do we look at this accountability? For a young person, it is, what was happening in my life that created this space for me to make the decisions I made? Why did I make those decisions? And what keeps me from making those decisions in the future? And working with the person harmed to say, how did this really affect me? What do I need in my life moving forward? What do I want? What does justice look like for me? What does healing look like for me? And we support those individuals in having a conversation and coming together and ultimately developing a plan to say, this is what it looks like for community. And oftentimes we hear the same stories from a young person as we hear from a person harmed. We hear them wanting the same things. We hear people addressing, like, in community, I just don't want this to happen to anybody else. I want everyone to be safe. I want that young person to be happy and healthy and not to do this thing again, right? So there are just all of these components. And what I think that we have found the most is that on both sides of that, when we have community building that happens, a person harmed feels less angry. They feel more healing. They feel less of the negative things that we associate as a community with a harm that happens. And for a young person, as soon as they are made to be part of that community, then they don't want to hurt that community. That community becomes valuable to them as soon as they feel like they are valued in that community. And I think those are just some of the important things to note.
What are some of the what are some of the kinds of cases that your program takes? You lead that program.
So we have an MOU that allows us to take aggravated burglary, which in our area for a young person is that person broke into a home. We have car burglaries, which oftentimes is I opened a car door to look for change. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but I do think it's important for people to understand some of the systemic stuff that happens for our young people and what they're doing. We take car thefts, and then we have a clause that says, if there are other cases that are deemed appropriate, those cases might be referred to us. And so we have had attempted homicide and a homicide case.
So you all take cases all the way from home burglary to homicide. And
yeah.
What kind of outcomes have you had over the last several years?
So I think we have a 96% satisfaction rate with our persons harmed. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about that is that there's a survey that came in that dropped our satisfaction rate, and that was because a case had to be returned to court, and the person harmed was mad that they didn't get to speak with the young person, because that was ultimately what they wanted. So that it looks like almost a negative action on our status, but at the end of the day, they were just upset they didn't get to continue with us, which I think is important to note. None of the young people that we have had that have completed the program have been reconvicted of anything. We have taken over 88 cases, serving over 100 youth, serving probably about 90 persons harmed, and just, yeah.
So you've got a 0% reconviction recidivism rate. How many young people, have any of them ever have been rearrested?
And so I think we have had 2 young people who have been rearrested, but those didn't result in convictions.
Okay, so we've got 4%-ish recidivism. So it seems like restorative justice, and again, we're talking about cases spanning from burglaries to homicides, does provide an alternative framework for responding to harm. Andrea, Paul, talk to us a little bit about you guys' program there. What kinds of specific work are you guys doing? And I want to invite our audience. We've got about 15 minutes left. I want to invite you. And I see some questions in the Q&A section. Go ahead and begin and put your questions in the Q&A. We're gonna take the last 10 minutes or so to get to those questions. Paul, talk to us a little bit about some of the programming you guys are doing there.
Okay, so just like Ashlee spoke about, we've been doing some terrific work in mitigation. We started in youth mitigation, felony mitigation. We believe we know that preschool to prison pipeline is a real thing. We also know that just like when T got incarcerated, when Ashlee got incarcerated as a youth, I would be 100%. I seen the YOP youth offender program. I didn't participate in it, but I had some peers come through there. And there's no special rehabilitative mechanisms in an adult prison that allows them to rehabilitate a young person better than they would have in any other institution. So it's very destructive to put a child in an adult prison. There's nothing there that actually they can benefit from, I believe. So I just wanted to touch on that real briefly. Can you get me back on track now? Because I want to.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, just thinking about you guys' program.
Okay, yeah. So our program, we've actually taken off 400 years. We've been in the Community Passageways has been in existence for just over 4 years now. We've actually went in, advocated for young people who are justice involved, wrapped ourselves around their family, because we do believe in our organization that it is a misnomer to take off a dirty blanket and or a sheet, wash that, and then return it to a dirty mattress or a soil mattress. So we do also wrap around services for and with the family. We are involved in every aspect of especially a court involved young person, with whether that is with their JPC, whether that is with their substance abuse counselors. Some of them are dealing with mental health issues, whether that is dealing with family and the brokenness, right? The roles reversals, the absence of father and or mother, and all of these things that society contributes, that we contribute to this. Our organization attaches itself to these young people, to our community. Community Passageways give a consistent compassion to our community that allows them, first of all, to see us not as ambulance chasers, to see us not as somebody that only comes when distress is there, right? We were having a conversation a couple of weeks back of somebody moving on to a different career choice, right? I can't move on to a different career choice, right? If and when I leave my position, right, I'm still going to be in this community. I'm still going to be the uncle, the big brother, big homie OG to the individuals that are directly affected with a mass incarceration, with repressive and oppressive systems of justice, right? So our organization works tirelessly. There's a group we've grown from just a few to almost 65 employees with reentry, deep dive, dealing with some of the individuals that are directly impacted by gun violence, the CP Fit, family integration therapy, where we have hero circles. We do mediation, restorative justice pieces and all that. We have such an impressive, and it is an array of individuals from Tennessee to Seattle, right, that is combining together this synergy. And Ashlee, Andrea, I would like to say one of Andrea's words, this sistergy that is coming together and creating something that is an alternative, not to incarceration, because I do believe that at some time in my life, I needed a social pause. I needed a disconnect to where I could pause for a second. I believe that there are 5 benefits of incarceration. We can get through that some other time, but I needed that pause, one of them being that pause, right? But mass incarceration, this thing that we are doing to where, once again, America sees itself as this corrector of social woes and aversions and all that type of stuff, has allowed us to go into this space to where the only thing that we think we can do is lock them up. Once again, social distancing was a thing before the pandemic, right? And those are the things that our society, that I gotta say, Andrea, and I'm sorry, really, really, really works hard, tirelessly to get this stuff done. And I have to say, not even Lauren, UT, and Ashlee and whomever else has been just as impacted as well as is doing this work. I know you guys are doing hard work, and I salute every effort. So that's what we're doing here at CP. Hopefully I didn't take too long. Director of Reentry, Mrs. Altheimer, and give her some place to.
Did he give statistics?
I didn't. I only gave the 400.
Okay, so let me do statistics. We have served over 300 kids. We have taken over 400 years off of the books, and we've only had 10% recidivism rate. Over 85 of our participants in our program are housed and have employment or are back in school. So I'll give you the statistics.
Yeah. So you're to our audience, you're looking at some real life examples of how this can work. And I certainly encourage you to take deeper dives into these folks and their organizations, just to learn more and see and appreciate some of the models that are out there. And by the way, Community Passages and Raphah Institute are really just an example of the array of organizations in this movement that Paul mentioned around the country, from Philly to Oakland, and from Miami to New York. It is happening. Jurisdictions are taking on so much more of this as an option. We see questions coming through. Sasha asked a very important question: how do you reclaim your dignity after it has been forcibly stripped from you in order to be able to do this work and to help others? Ashlee responded to that by saying for her was a reclaiming of her name. She did not understand the importance of language. She is not an inmate, a convict, an offender. She's a daughter, a mother, a woman. Being in spaces like this one, where her voice is heard, and seeing a community that loves and cares. Absolutely. I saw a question asking about victimless crimes and the impact of harm on the community, on the community and the society at large. We only have about 8 minutes left. Terrance, I want to give you a chance, man, to jump in here and talk a little bit about your experience with restorative justice, your work, how it might have been a difference maker for you. You talked about not having such an opportunity when you were 17 years old. How are you seeing it being an impact in the lives of young people in your work? Thank you. Community Passageway. I mispronounced the name of the organization. So sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, Terrance.
All right, thank you again, and honor to everyone that's on here too as well. Had a pleasure of being on the panel with all of you. So the work as I see it now, and the work that I do now, as far as restorative justice, is giving these youth opportunities, is giving them second chances and giving them chances, that I was not given. I wasn't given a chance. And let me say, I had an illegal sentence. So I had a 20-year sentence at one. I had an illegal 20-year sentence at 100%, served 17 years on an illegal sentence. So not only did that system fail me, they took years of my life that never could be restored. Ain't no restorative justice in that. You cannot restore that. But however, these youths are given an opportunity to live a life, that maybe they wouldn't be afforded the opportunity in prison, because if you incarcerate them and you just house them and you cage them, are we really helping them? Are we really helping? And if that system was working, where you incarcerate our children, where you lock them up, where you put them in cells, where you put them in rooms, where you house them from 23 to 1, where you house them all day like they're animals, if that was working, we wouldn't have the system today. We wouldn't have it today. But we work with our kids, and we give them chance. We work with them directly. We work with them directly. We get involved. We ask the questions that the system don't ask. We show them love. We show them care. A lot of our children come from broken homes, from dysfunctional homes, and the system don't care about that. They locking up kids who have already been locked up. They are punishing kids who've been punished their whole life. They are victimizing people who have already been victims of themselves. So we work towards healing. And that's what the system is not designed to heal our youth. The system is not designed to really rehabilitate them, to really correct them, to give them second chances, to really give them hope at their futures. It's not really designed to that. But the restorative justice work that we do, because we work with people who really care. It cares about both people, the people harmed. It cares about, the impact of the youth. It cares about their future. We get in and we care about their future. We care about their potentials. We try to maximize their potential. We invest in their futures. We actually do the work. We actually do the work. We actually show them love. The system do not love our kids. It don't love our kids. It don't care about the kids. It don't care about the person harmed. It don't care about that. The whole system is another whole form of slavery. And it's about capitalism. It's about money. But our children are worth more than money. It is about their lives. It is about the community. What does it look like to restore the community? What does it look like to heal the community? Is that system, is that criminal injustice system, is that set up to heal the communities? Is it set up to, it's set up to just reincarcerate and reoffend. It's set up to just incarcerate people who already been incarcerated in their lives already, who's suffering from addictions and dysfunction and from so many different, issues that our system is not designed to treat. And that is what we do. We are actually really getting there and applying treatment where healing can really exist. We work with kids, I'm talking about, that could have been I was thrown away. I was thrown away to the system. I was thrown away. It's only by the grace of God that I survived with my right mind. With my right mind, I got back out in car. I rehabilitated myself. The system was not set up to rehabilitate me. The system was set up to lock me up and to damage me more than I was damaged. But we work with our kids. We work with, repairing some of the damage that have been done. And we see the light. Some of the kids that didn't have a hope, we see working with them, now they have hope. We work with our kids. They're reaching out to us. We seeing kids graduate, not from incarceration. If they wasn't, not from being incarcerated, not from being housed, not from being caged like they animals, but kids are actually sitting out here because of restorative justice. They're able to graduate on the outside with their classes. They're able to still, repair, some of the credits. We're working with our kids that's able to get jobs and not work like they're slaves for 17 to 25 cents. They don't lose their humanity, but they still able to hold on to their humanity and their dignity and still not be stripped from their families. Instead of an opportunity to grow up as children are supposed to grow up free.
Thank you, Terrance. We got 3 minutes left. I'm just going to give some closing remarks. First of all, I want to thank Access to Justice and the conference, the organizers, for creating this space. I want to thank the panelists, Paul, Ashlee, Andrea, Terrance. Thank you for not only what you've brought to this moment, but what you bring to your cities, what you bring to the communities that you serve, what you bring to the people that you serve. Thank you for holding the experiences that you've had in such a way that it hasn't broken you, but that you are able to use it as a way of really helping to bless another life. Thank you for opening up your heart today to allow us to peer into and swim around in what is, what really is just such, not that it's toxic space inside of you, but just an experience that has just been so harmful and so toxic. And so thank you for letting us experience that with you. To all of those who have been here today, thank you for being interested in this conversation. We think about restorative justice at Raphah Institute as an accounting for harm as it moves through a community in a way that doesn't cause more harm. How do we account for harm as it moves through a community in a way that doesn't cause more harm? Harm does move through a community. Hurt people hurt people. When a person's been hurt, they're more likely to hurt somebody else, right? And so restorative justice is our way, it's our process, it's an ethos, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of working that says, let's account for the harm that's not only happened in the moment of a crime, but all the harm that preceded that moment, so that we don't allow it to continue to travel through the community, right? That is how we think about restorative justice, and that's what our work is about. That's what we do. And I think Andrea and Paul and the work that you all are doing is you're doing the same work. And so if you all are interested in, if you're interested in learning more about what these organizations are doing, listen, feel free to reach out. Go to certainly our website at raphah.org and, just hop on our mailing list. Andrea, I'm not sure if you guys' contact information has been put. Good. Communitypassageways.org. Visit their website, get on their mailing list, connect with them, and think about, what it might look like. I saw someone put a comment in about, their school system. Absolutely. Explore these ideas, have the conversations more, have the conversations in your communities. And we'll just stop there. Our time is up. Thank you all very, very, very much for being here today. And I'm going to toss it back to our good friends to our conference organizers.
Thank you very much to our panelists. That was a very powerful presentation. I know that you've impacted a lot of people today, and thank you for everybody who attended. This is the conclusion of this session, and thank you very much for coming.